I remember I was on vacation at that time. My main project that I was working on was this design patterns for humans. I also have it open source on my GitHub. So this one was like, I made it public. I put it on Hacker News, and I woke up next day. It was 10,000 stars, like on this project, like design patterns for humans. Immediately after that, I was just working on the developer roadmap because just I had the idea and I wanted to do it. And I never even thought about like it would just grow into that this big. Like within a week, I think we were at 10, 20,000 stars or so. Like it got really famous. And the reason was someone posted on Reddit. There's a subreddit called Learn Programming, I think. It got to the front page of Reddit in there. Then people started sharing from here and there. Like Learn Programming went to this coding subreddit, it went there. It went to the front page from there also. Then there was this massive like effect from there. Like people were sharing with their friends and so on. And within a week or so, like we were sitting at 25,000 stars.
Kamran, your roadmaps have inspired, educated, they have guided, taught, and informed millions of developers across the globe. And so many are familiar with your work, but maybe less familiar with you as a person. And I want to really thank you for joining me today as we discuss your work, your life lessons, your career, and some of your teaching philosophy.
Thank you for having me, Basim.
Of course. All right, Kamran, why roadmap.sh? Why did you start this project?
All right, so I'll give you some background, like why I started. So first of all, I graduated from a small university back in Pakistan, and in the universities there in Pakistan, normally the focus is mainly on the teaching. They don't really focus much on, for example, when you get out of the university, what is going to be the job look like, what will be the different roles that you can apply for, and stuff like that. So there's mostly theoretical knowledge, and this theoretical knowledge is also on the high level. They don't really go deep into the stuff, and they don't really pique the interest of yours. So while I was in the university, I was also a Microsoft student partner, and also I was IEEE investor. So I was doing a lot of events there. I was doing a lot of meetups and hackathons and workshops and stuff like that. So when I graduated from the university, I got a job in a small service-based company, and I was still in touch with the students. So students were still reaching out to me because of the IEEE and the Microsoft student partnership. So I was guiding the students still after my university days. I saw that when I was guiding them, I was mostly repeating myself. So it was same kind of message again and again, like same. So do this, do this, do this. So here are the job opportunities that you have. So you can either be a front-end developer, back-end developer, DevOps. Like if you get into the web development, these are the fields. If you get into the, let's say, the graphics designing, these are the fields, and so on. So I found myself repeating again and again. So I thought that maybe I should make it into this visual diagram that I can just make it once, and whenever someone reaches out to me, I can just share it with them. So that's how the initial version of the roadmap.sh came. So it was just a small repository on GitHub with 3 images, front end, back end, and DevOps. And that's it. I was just sharing these images with the people. Roadmap.sh, the website was built after like 4 or 5 years after the project was launched, when it turned into this website that you see on the website.
Awesome. Did you study computer science or engineering, by the way?
I studied software engineering.
Software engineering. And what was the distinction? Like a lot of people get confused by this. Do I study computer science? Do I study engineering? What is the best way? Did you feel like what you studied impacted your career as a software engineer?
It should have if we were taught properly, but no, I don't think it was really that much of an impact, because I looked at the coursework. It was mostly similar for computer science and IT and software engineering, at least for my university. But in general, like software engineering is more towards like software design and architecture, more programming oriented. Computer science is more into the hardware and computers and stuff like that. IT is more networking and everything, like in general.
Here's a tricky question for you. Like if you were to design a curriculum right now, based on your industry experience, based on what you've seen, and maybe based on your roadmaps, how would that curriculum look like? I know it's a tough one, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I would say that I would probably remove all the topics that are not really relevant. So first of all, like initial like first few months would be just letting the students explore different areas and letting the students find out like what they're interested in. So first like few months, like maybe one semester could be just that, like a general overview of everything. After that, for example, the students can pick up, for example, what they want to specialize in, whether it is like if they want to go into the web development or mobile development or whatever it is. Then depending on that, for example, we could explore into different areas into that, and it would be more practical than the theoretical knowledge. And for example, if you are being taught about the theoretical knowledge, you should also be taught about like what is the practical usage of this. For example, if you're being taught about the UML, and stuff like that, like designing software. You should also be taught about, like, for example, here's the architecture for, let's say, Uber or Netflix. So here's how they are designed and stuff like that.
So here's another perspective, because I want to argue the other side as well, right? One time, in my experience, I was writing code way before joining university, but my way of writing code was mostly just trying to make things work. And I really did not have any notion of what the theory behind computer science was, the theory of software, databases, operating systems, the math behind all of this. I didn't know there was a formulaic way of trying to reason about this whole entire universe. And my expectation from the university was also to prepare me for the job market, right? Because you pay so much money, you expect that at the end of the program, you're just going to go and find employment and be able to work. And then, to my surprise, as with anyone else, we discovered that none of this is directly applicable to the workforce. So one time I was having this conversation with the dean of the department, or the chairperson of the department, actually. And I asked him, like, what's the point of all of this theory? Why don't you just focus on all of the practical stuff? And he said something that's, stuck with me. He said, it's not our job to graduate technicians per se. Our job is to graduate well-rounded individuals who have a good command on the fundamentals, and then they can decide for themselves which area of the practice they want to, dive deeper into and build up that knowledge. So in the chairperson's mind, the theoretical component of the program was much more fundamental and important than the practical stuff, because he felt that the practical stuff can be acquired much more easily if you understand the fundamentals. So do you agree with this perspective or not?
I think there should be some sort of balance. You should not really go really deep into the stuff, like theoretical stuff. So otherwise, for example, when you graduate out of the university, people are mostly looking for the experience. So they look, for example, let's say that there is a job for, let's say, a web developer or a backend engineer, API engineer. And you haven't built a single API while you were at the university, but you know all about, for example, the RFCs and the standards and all the stuff like that, but you never got the hands-on experience in the final projects and stuff like that while building the stuff. So I think there should be some sort of balance. You should not really go deep into the theoretical stuff, and you should not really leave the theoretical part and just focus on the practical aspect. I think there should be some balance. So maybe like half of it should be this stuff, and to a certain point. For example, you don't need to know about, for example, all the stuff that is deeper below that.
I think in addition to the balance, maybe we should be setting expectations properly. Maybe universities should stop advertising themselves as, institutions to prepare for the job market. Maybe universities should advertise their programs for what they are. If you study computer science, you're studying computer science. This is not preparing you for the job market, but maybe they can offer another program, which is called, computer practitioner or technologist or whatever it is, right? And they can define clearly. But I think there's no selling point. I think there's some prestige associated with your degree and, what these professors think is best for the students. Plus, also, this is what they practiced. This is what they studied themselves. So they think that stuff is more superior to the practical things. Very few are actual practitioners in the industry themselves, right?
I agree with you. And I think it varies from university to university also. So, for example, my brother recently got admission in Lancaster University in Manchester. I was looking at his curriculum. It is really more practical. Like, for example, he's still in his first few months. Like, he just passed 3 months in the university. And he's being taught about the practical API, like how to develop the APIs, how to, for example, design the databases, like normalization and all the stuff like that. And he's just getting started. And the title is almost same. I think it varies from university to university and the kind of people who you have at the university who are teaching the students as well. The problem is, for example, the small universities is like the people who get to teach the students, they have never had experience in the practical like job market. They just studied, they got, for example, MS, PhD, and they just got into the teaching.
Correct. I agree. And I think the universities have been sort of disrupted by all of these online platforms that do education, and they are changing their ways a little bit to be much more competitive and to meet what the actual demand from the students looks like. So definitely things have changed more in Western countries than anywhere else in the world. I think a lot of our region still has a little bit of catch up to do in that regard. But yes, I definitely see what you're saying. Let's go back to roadmap, right? How did it start? Like, sure, you wanted to not repeat yourself, but why did you think, let's make it visual? Why was that the first instinct for you?
Visual, because actually if you go to the internet and search for how to become a backend developer, for example, you'll find like hundreds of different articles, and each article is, for example, just a bunch of text. Like, for example, there would be a long essay. You just have to go through it and you have to figure it out yourself. For me, for example, I am a visual guy. Whenever I'm building something, I try to explain I try to go to the paper, draw stuff, and then go to the coding stuff, and, for example, do the stuff like that. So I try to do everything visually, whether I'm teaching something or whether I'm coding something or whatever. That was the idea behind the roadmap being a visual format. So I didn't want to make it just another textual blog post out there on the internet. I wanted to make it visual, put it on GitHub so that other people can also, like, first of all, if they come to the page, within a few seconds, they just catch the interest, and then they are, for example, like, they find it interesting to contribute as well and stuff like that.
Do you feel like you can cover the depth necessary for such a roadmap in a visual form? Like, I think one of the comments on your roadmaps was always that it's very broad. It covers pretty much everything, but people got a little bit confused because it didn't give them the nuance, or go deep into, like, why is this necessary? Why should I study this? Why should I study that? Did you get this feedback at any point?
There was. So actually, you cannot please everyone, right? So there were a mixed feedback. So for beginners, for example, they would come and they would say, like, this is really daunting. So someone experienced would come and they would say that, for example, you did not go into the deeper parts of this one. For example, let's say that if you are mentioning APIs, you haven't mentioned, for example, like Open API specs, or, for example, the RFCs about HTTP and all the stuff like that. So I had to be a bit of a dictator there to be able to. It is more opinionated, so I had to come up with something that I think, for example, if I'm teaching someone, I would say, like, start with this, and then you can keep experimenting with this stuff. So that's how the initial version was built. Then we expanded into the skill-based roadmaps and stuff like that. For example, once you are done with, so for example, if you talk about the backend roadmap, so there are two versions: the front-end roadmap, front-end beginner roadmap, and front-end detailed roadmap. Then we have the skill roadmaps, which are more detailed. For example, if you're looking at the JavaScript, the skill roadmap would be like JavaScript and expanding on the topics within JavaScript as well. So this was the main idea. Like, there's one roadmap which is covering the overall role, and then there's skill roadmaps which just expand onto the items inside the role-based roadmaps.
Brilliant. Makes sense. And I like this, honestly. Like, if you find an area you want to dive deeper into, you have the specialization roadmap, which you can go, and it will guide you a little bit further in that domain. So when did you publish the first iteration, and what did you publish it on? Was it always like a website, or did you start the project in another way?
So the initial launch was done in 2016, at the end of 2016, in the beginning of 2017. And again, as I mentioned, like, the first launch was just two images, front end and back end. DevOps was pending. It stayed pending for almost like a month or two, because I did not know much about the DevOps. So I was constantly reaching out to people to help me build the DevOps roadmap, because I was interested in this roadmap, because I wanted to learn about DevOps, but I didn't have much experience in this, and I didn't want to build something just by searching here and there, just coming up with something. So that's why, like, DevOps was launched a bit later, but at the beginning of 2017, the front end and back end roadmaps were there.
Where did you publish them? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
It was on GitHub. It was simple README.
GitHub.
There was nothing else at all on the GitHub.
Awesome. And did it catch fire immediately? Like, did it become popular right away, or did it take time for people to discover it? Did you promote it in any way, shape, or form? How did people start learning about it?
So I remember I was on vacation at that time. My main project that I was working on was this design patterns for humans. I also have it open source on my GitHub. So this one was like, I made it public. I put it on Hacker News, and I woke up next day, it was 10,000 stars, like, on this project, like design patterns for humans. So like, immediately after that, I was just working on the developer roadmap, because just I had the idea and I wanted to do it. And I never even thought about, like, it would just grow into this big. Like, within a week, I think we were at 20,000 stars or so. Like, it got really famous. And the reason was, someone posted on Reddit. There's a subreddit called Learn Programming, I think. So it got to the front page of Reddit in there. Then people started sharing from here and there. Like, Learn Programming went to this coding subreddit, it went there. It went to the front page from there also. Then there was this massive, like, effect from there. Like, people were sharing with their friends and so on. And within a week or so, like, we were sitting at 25,000 stars.
Wow. And did the community start contributing to these roadmaps, or like how did you manage the community aspect and the contributions? Because I'm pretty sure everybody has opinions, and when something gets popular and it has that many stars, people are gonna start wanting to make changes and all of that stuff. How did you manage this part?
So it was, as I mentioned, like it was really overwhelming. It was like, I think one of my initial projects that got so big. At that time, I had only like one or two other projects that were big, like design patterns for humans and a couple of other repositories. And I had no experience at all managing the communities and stuff like that. So people were coming with the issues. People were, for example, shouting, "Why do you have this there? Why are you recommending this and that? Why not this and that?" So people had their own opinions and stuff. So I tried to reply to them in the beginning, and then I just left the project. So project was there, and I was using it as I wanted to. I was just using it like as a link sharing page that I was sharing with my friends and so on. It just stayed there for I think like 5-6 months. It was there. That's it. Like front end, back end, and DevOps were there, and that's it. But then at the end of 2017, I had to revise the project because it has been revised every year since the launch. Like every end of year, like I just go through it and I just revise like some of the items which are, for example, if I have different opinions, if I have different recommendations, stuff like that. The community was mostly there. Like people were recommending. The contributions were mostly in the beginning was just in the form of suggestions. For example, someone is saying that I would recommend that you add this. I recommend you add that, remove this, remove that, and so on. So this was mostly the contribution in the beginning. Proper contributions did not start until we launched the website after 3 years, like at, I think 2019. So before that, it was just mostly suggestions.
And when you launched the website, like if you don't mind sharing, like how many views do you have so far since your launch? How many times has it been visited, or like is there a metric that you keep track of to gauge the popularity of your work?
In the beginning, I was keeping track of it, but then I left it because but it has been massive. Like we have like in terms of number of users, like I never looked at it, but it's like millions of users.
Wow.
Every month we get around like almost 1 million users on the website.
Amazing. And so tell me more about, like, did you ever think about monetizing it? Did you ever think about how can I make this platform more useful maybe, or how can I, make some money out of this? Because obviously not everybody can create such a, popular thing that fits definitely a need, and that people, wanted this, and they were sharing it and they were finding value in it, obviously.
For me, actually, once I started, like the side projects that I always did, I never thought about making money from them at all. The roadmap was started in the similar way. I did not have any idea, like if I was going to make money from it, should I want to make money from it or no. It was just a side project that I had on my GitHub, and that's it. I didn't even know like if it could make money, like how would it make money and so on. But I was getting like people were reaching out to me. For example, a lot of people were trying to sell their courses from these roadmaps. A lot of people were trying to put for me to put the affiliate links for them and so on. I didn't put them because again, like the people who were visiting these roadmaps were mostly the beginners, and I did not want to, like, for example, deceive these people just to make money from it. So I tried to stay away from that like forever. Like I never like put the affiliate links in there. I never put any courses in there. I never got into any sort of partnership. I tried to monetize through the ads in the middle somewhere. Like I added the carbon ads, which was making some money, but and that's it. Like there was no monetization at all.
Makes sense. What stage of your career were you in at that point in time? Like how many years in the industry were you in by then?
So when I launched the project at that time, I was almost, I think, 4 years almost into the industry. So it was still early. Like the stuff that I was mentioning also in the roadmap, like it was based on my expertise, which were not so good at that time. But now I look at the older version, it was like really bad. But still, they got improved after some time. But yeah, like almost 3-4 years at that time. And at that time, as I mentioned, like, my main focus was just building things. I was just doing the side projects and trying to learn as much as I can with these side projects.
I love it because also in my experience, a lot of developers, or a lot, not everyone, but a lot, try to document their learnings through blogs maybe, or through some very rough notes. I personally like mind maps a lot, and I think keeping track of your own learning and education in that way is very, very helpful. Were you using these roadmaps for yourself, like, for example, to set the bar higher every time you learn something new? Or was it more of just, upgrading them on a yearly basis, and that's pretty much it?
No, I think they got improved because I was using them as well. So, for example, all the yellow boxes, the purple checks that you see on the roadmap, these are the stuff that, for example, in the front end, back end, and DevOps, these are the stuff, the items that I know or I use, for example. So I was using it as well. So actually, most of the projects that you see on my GitHub, they are also like the ones that I built because I wanted to learn this stuff. So roadmap was one of the projects that I was learning as well. For example, so when I launched this project at that time, this was my first job where I joined a startup-based company, not a service-based company. Before that, it was mostly service-based companies. You don't get to learn too much in the service-based companies. One of the reasons behind making these roadmaps also was I wanted to plan out what I wanted to learn, and that's why I did it. So this was kind of a plan, not for others, for me as well. So I was using it for my own personal learning as well.
And where is roadmap.sh today? Like, what are you doing with it today? I see you're definitely developing it much further. You're adding specializations, and these look great. So what's happening with it?
So I went full time on roadmap.sh almost more than a year ago, like year and a half ago. Right now, like we continue to expand more roadmaps. First, like there are multiple different things: the community, content, and the functionality. So these are three key like focus areas for the website. The content wise, we continue to add more roadmaps. So before it was mostly me, but now we are reaching out to mostly subject matter experts and try to get help from them as much as possible. So this is the content aspect. So try to keep updating the roadmaps and adding new roadmaps as well. So community wise, like we have now, we recently added that login and registration, so the accounts are there, so people can track their progress. People can like mark as favorites and stuff like that. So we are working on the accounts, and we're also planning on launching the user teams soon. So teams would be like a mix of companies. So companies, for example, let's say that GitHub wants to track their developers and their skill sets and so on. So they could invite all their developers onto the platform, and they could see like what is the expertise that everyone has. And you could also like manager can use it as a like a growth plan for their junior developers as well. So this is one. Second part is the study group. So for example, if I'm learning something, I might not be learning something properly because no one is holding me accountable. So you can form a study group with your friends, and then you can see the progress of each other. Whenever they mark something as done, you get the notification, and they get the notification. You have a shared dashboard and stuff like that. So we're working on expanding the platform and trying to add as much content as we can while maintaining the quality of the content that we have. Yeah. So our goal. Sorry, I'm cutting you off. So our goal for roadmap is to keep it as a platform where someone comes to learn, like if they want to learn, for example, if they want to understand like what they want to learn, but not how to learn, not where to learn. So we never be putting the courses and stuff like that on the website or the blog post. We'll always put the external links and the external courses and stuff like that, but we'll mostly provide the guidance. If you want to learn something, this is how you should learn it. How you learn it, you go outside, you learn however you want.
So you're never going to be like a content platform. You're always going to be answering the what, not necessarily the how. Are you going to help answer the why maybe? Because I think that's also an important factor.
Yeah, so what and why are two of the things that we'll be focusing on. What, why, and also apart from this, we also have plans for quizzes and project ideas. So, for example, there might be like in front-end roadmap, if you have learned 10 items, we would suggest you, for example, work on these projects. And these are the projects. For example, there are external links from GitHub that other developers who are learning from the platform they have shared. So you can look at their solution as well. So it's going to be that kind of platform, but not like how to learn, like not proper course.
Got it. And again, my question is, you're working on this full time. So how are you monetizing it right now?
So the project, so we've got some investment from a company. So I'm working with them now on this. So yeah, so the monetary part is covered. So that's why the ads are gone. There's nothing on the website for monetization at all. Everything is free. So we just want to keep it building for now and think about the monetization later. And the monetization is not going to come from the developer. It's going to be coming from the teams or stuff like that. So the platform will be always free for the developers.
Interesting philosophy. Why do you feel like developers, and again, I ask this because I am asking these questions to myself as well. I create educational content, and I feel like there's a lot of time and effort that is put in these creations, right? And someone has to pay for this time, just like you buy any product. There is a cost associated with creating this material. So why does it always feel like developers themselves shouldn't be bearing this cost? Why is this always this aversion towards, we don't want to charge developers for anything? Shouldn't that be the normal?
I think the developers are mostly reluctant in paying. Like it is not really easy to get money out of the developers' pockets. So most of the time, monetization, you have to think about the different ways. So I have been building the tools for developers ever since the start of my career. I have built plugins, I have built the developer tools and stuff like that. But it's always been hard trying to get money out of the developers' pockets. It's always you have to think about the different aspect, as whether it is going to be their company they paid for them and stuff like that.
Right. Tell me about it. Yeah, developers are definitely one of the most difficult demographic to build content for, because on the one hand, they use ad blockers. They're very technically savvy. So ads is not a great mechanism. They're not going to be influenced to buy anything. So affiliate marketing also does not work. Selling courses might work, and selling books, for example, might work, but also in some regions, but not another, because also for cultural differences. Some people, I don't know, they have feelings that if you consume certain content, you shouldn't be paying for it, or that if people are in a Western country, let's say, that they are rich enough, they shouldn't make any income or revenue from their work. But again, yeah, I understand. I was just wondering if there was a philosophical, like a reason behind it, or it's just a bit more pragmatic. And I understand your way, and I think it makes sense.
I'll also share some bit of my experience. So I tried to get some sponsorships to sponsor my effort because I had a full-time job. The roadmap was just a side project. So I tried to make money from the developers. So for example, in the sign up, I added, for example, so there were two types of signups. There's free sign up where you just get the updates like the free roadmaps and stuff like that. Then I was making also the visual diagrams and stuff like that. And also I added the this like premium kind of sign up box. So sponsor me on GitHub. And in your email, I will send you weekly like infographics about the different topics. And it's funny because whenever I was posting these infographics on Twitter, they were getting like thousands of likes, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 likes each time. But like the conversion ratio was 0.00 something. Like I only got like 5 sponsors on my website, even though like they were getting like hundreds of thousands of visits from developers on these pages. But people who were converting was like 0.00 something.
Yes, I know. It's funny. I published a small project called the Knowledge Graph, and my idea was a bit similar to yours. I wanted to have like a centralized place where developers can just go download the mind map or whatever it is, and it explores all the different topics. But my Knowledge Graph was branching out a little bit more also towards the professional aspect, career, mobility, and not just purely technical topics, even though technical content is definitely part of it. And these conversations were also summarized with highlights and key takeaways for the consumers to be able to, without spending a whole hour listening to a podcast, they can get away the important stuff. And I put it out there, with a certain price that I felt reasonable. And no matter how much I changed the price, the conversion was very, very, very low. And then one day I decided, when I hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, I said like, okay, I want to make a giveaway. I want to give it away for free. Right? And I just want to see how many people will actually go for it. And I probably, within the period of 4 or 5 months, I sold maybe 20 copies, 30 copies, tops. And with all of the price experimentation. And in one day, 24 hours, when I did the free giveaway, 500 copies were gone. So, yeah. So obviously there's demand. People want it. It's just that they didn't feel maybe that it was worth paying for, or I don't really know what goes on in someone's mind. Maybe also like it's not affordable for a lot of people, especially if it's in a foreign currency. And I can understand all of these reasons. But yeah, I think this demographic is a bit more difficult to work with than anyone else. Let's move on to talk a little bit about your career. You mentioned you worked in services for like the beginning of your career for many years before you switched to a product startup. What's the main takeaway of working in services? Do you recommend for people to work in services? What are the main lessons learned from your experience there?
So for me personally, I worked for almost 3 years in service-based companies. I think I learned a lot in there, but I think I learned because I had a lot of service knowledge about a bunch of different areas. The problem with service-based companies is like when you're working with them, like one day you're working on this project, the other day you're working on a different project, the other day you're working on a different project, and so on. And focus is always on delivering. There's not a focus on quality, or there's no focus on, for example, doing things in a proper way and stuff like that. So in my experience, I think I learned a lot. So I learned about, for example, the game development. I learned about the backend development, Android development, front-end development, so all the stuff like that. And the main growth, I think, started when I joined the product-based companies, because that's where you have like a product that you own and you have to do things proper way, because you are maintaining it in the long run. And if things go wrong, it is going to be wrong for you. So as I mentioned, like in the previous in the initial phases, I would recommend for anyone like who's a beginner to start with service-based companies to get experience and get this broader experience about different areas, and then try to get into the product-based companies and grow further from there, I think.
I agree with this perspective, but I also felt from my experience, because I spent a lot of time in service companies, the breadth of the knowledge is much wider, even though there will be areas of depth, but the breadth is a good exposure, I think, and it helps you identify what do you want to focus on down the line. And I personally get excited about the variety of projects instead of sometimes diving into one specific thing and staying there for a long time, especially if there are no new challenges to tackle in that particular project or code base. And if it goes into maintenance mode very quickly, then there's not much growth to be done there, right? But services offers this opportunity to always be switching and tackling new challenges.
Exactly. I think I also, like in the initial days, like the knowledge that I got, it really helped me in the long run, because now, for example, if I'm working on something of my own, I don't really need to rely on someone. Let's say that if I want to make a mobile app, I can do it. If I want to do the front end, I can do it. If I want to do the design, I can do it by myself. So this is the stuff that you get at the service-based company, because in the product-based company, you're working on something. Unless you are the kind of guy who likes to do stuff on their own, you don't get that much at a product-based company that you get in the service-based company.
Correct. And the service-based companies want more generalists than specialists. Obviously, they want specialists for certain things, but I think their business model relies more on selling the credentials and credibility of generalists than anything else. And product companies require more specialists who have in-depth knowledge in particular areas, because they can add value to these. And also, it depends on the scale of these product companies, which phase they are in, whether they are at the startup phase, growth stage, or maybe towards the end. And the requirements, they differ greatly. When did you make the switch to product companies? And was it easy for you, or did you feel like you were locked into services for such a long time that the transition was difficult?
Transition was a bit difficult. So as I mentioned, like in after 3 years of my career, I switched to this product-based company. It was a travel portal in Dubai that I worked with, and it was also like, it was early days, so we were around 10-20 people at that time, and I saw this company grow from 10 people to 1,000 people. And there, like, I got to work on this small chunk of the whole piece, so it was a bigger pie, and I was working on this small API. So I was working on the initially in the flights API. But I did get to learn a lot, because, for example, there was no notion of CI/CD, for example, before. There was no notion of, for example, the version controls, how you work with the different developers, how you have, for example, Scrum and all the stuff. There was like completely different world. It was a bit difficult in the beginning, but I think it really, like, this more resonated more with me, because like I got to learn about the product aspect, about the different things, for example, how to grow, how to see something grow from this like one thing that is making $0 per month into this really large scale and so on. And there, like, I got to work on several different projects. It was a service oriented architecture that we had, and we had a different variety of different technologies. And I learned a lot. Like, I think I stayed with this was the company that I stayed with the longest. I stayed with them, I think, like 4 years, and this is where I learned the
Amazing.
most.
So you grew the team from 10 to 1,000. And in how much of a period of time? Yeah, I mean, the company grew from.
Yeah, it was like in 4 years, it was like from 10 people to 1,000 people. The tech team that we had was almost like 100 to 120 people at that time. And when I joined them, I joined them as like this mid-level developer. And when I left them, I was working there as an engineering manager, and I had a team of like 5-6 developers. And with them, like I learned so much. Like I saw a lot of legacy code base. I saw a lot of scaling issues in the people and in the code base and stuff like that. And like I delivered several different projects. So it was really a great experience.
So let's dive a little bit into that, right? Because you grew the team 10 times, or the technical team grew about 10 times. So how did you approach scaling the people? Because when it's 10 people, you can just have a conversation, you make decisions, done. But then when you have new people coming in, you need to onboard them. They need to be aware of the previous decisions that were made. The platform needs to change to accommodate a lot more, coordination and all of that stuff. How did you approach it?
So I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. So as I said, that I was coming from the service-based company, so there was no notion of documentation at all. There was no notion of like onboarding was just like someone is sitting with you and you're working together. And this was the onboarding, and then you give them the task, and then they work on that, and that's it. So here now we had the tech team which is growing. So you have continuously set of features that you need to deliver. You have sprints going on. So you have to make sure that the quality is there. You have to make sure that the new people who are getting onboarded, they're up to speed as well. So I had to relearn a lot of different things. One of the things was, for example, making sure that the things that you do, they are done it in a way that it is done by you, but it is easier for others to maintain as well. So, for example, I was part of this squad there was a squad called Red Squad. So this squad was responsible for taking off the new projects and then giving it away to the existing teams. So we had to do it in a way that, for example, if we do it, they are easy. They can maintain it and so on also. So I learned a lot, like communication, documentation, like team growth, and all the stuff. Like everything was like from empathy to like hard skills. Everything was learned. Like I had to relearn everything.
Amazing. And just to clarify for whoever is listening, not all services companies operate this way. Like I mean, it varies. I think based on the type of the company, what are their objectives. In my experience, documentation in service companies was fundamental in a lot of the places where I worked, and to a point where, in consulting in general, if it's not written, it doesn't really exist in many ways. But I can understand also that there are different types of service-based companies. Some of them offer, developers to another company where you go and you work sort of as a contractor for a certain period of time. Sometimes companies take on projects maybe that they need to deliver in a certain period of time. So there are many models for service-based companies and how they operate. And I think how they work differs based on these models.
Exactly. As I mentioned, it was like I worked only with 2 service-based companies, and that was it. So this is my introduction to the service-based companies. I don't know like how the proper service-based companies operate. So my idea is like, this is what service-based companies are. Stay away from them. So this is what I have in mind.
Amazing. All right, cool. So just to focus a little bit more on the technical aspect of scale, how did you mentioned microservices, right? When did you make the decision to switch to that architecture, and how did it impact your, scaling and productivity and everything else?
So it was not proper microservices architecture per se. It was service-oriented architecture. So we did have the services, but it was on a bit like macro level than the micro level. The decision was done because we were growing, so we had to add a lot of different features, and one single application was becoming about kind of a bottleneck. It was difficult to scale. For example, let's say that a lot of people are searching for flights, but not many people are booking. So if you have one service, it is difficult to scale at all. The other issue was with the team. For example, if you have like 100 developers working on single repository, there are like issues with the deployment, there's issue with the release cycles and stuff like that. So the benefits of this was like we had all these different teams, like they were working on their own kind of projects, their own kind of decoupled APIs, and it was mainly done because of this, like scaling the team and scaling the tech. So the things can scale like separately, and things can scale also like in terms of team separately also.
How quickly were you able? Did you actually adopt continuous integration and continuous deployment, or was it more of a different approach to releases?
No, we had CI/CD. CI was there in the beginning. CD came later, a lot later actually. That there was the deployment was still manual. The decoupling. So first of all, like we had this one API, so it was slowly disintegrated into the smaller services. The first thing we did was like we took the payments out of it, made it into a single service. This was kind of a POC because we did not have it was I remember we were talking about 2017-16. It is still like the new trendy topic, so there's not many content out there, so people are still experimenting with this and learning and so on. So we did this like in an improper way. Like we took this main application, we took like part of it, made it into a service, then some data is here and there, some database is shared and so on. So it went with this messy approach, but then we got to a point like it was done in a proper way. Like everything is separate, like APIs are separate, databases are separate, and so on. We are talking with the SDKs and stuff like that, and like there's contracts, RFCs are there to make changes and stuff like that. So it did not start properly. Like it was done in this way, and slowly after like a year or two, we came up with this system that was working for us.
So after doing this, do you think it was a good decision? Because obviously when you move to a service-oriented architecture or even microservices, there's an operational overhead that is quite big. So before, if you operate with a monolith, it's much easier to deploy changes, much easier to do integration work, so on and so forth. But sometimes there are, bottlenecks where collaboration becomes hampered a little bit. That's why people move towards a service-oriented architecture where they can decouple these services, and these services can have their own life cycles, release cycles, so on and so forth. So at the end, do you think it was a good decision? Did it actually increase productivity, or did it really not pay off?
So definitely for us, it was the best decision we did. So we focused too much on the automation. So we tried to automate everything. So there was nothing manual at all, from the testing to deployments to, for example, the integration between the APIs, the SDKs, everything was automated. So we focused too much on the automation. It was a good decision because we used to have issues at the beginning, and then we kept learning from those mistakes, and we tried to keep improving it. At the end, like after 4 years, we did definitely have some of the issues going on, like every company has, but it was in a shape that was really working well for us at that time. And I think it was a good decision, like going with a service-oriented approach. But there were some mistakes also that I did learn from, and those mistakes were not repeated in the next company. At that time, we were doing for example, everything was built with PHP at that time. There was not modern frameworks like React and all that stuff. There used to be only AngularJS at that time. The other issue was, for example, the contracts between the APIs. So, for example, this API is talking to this API. They have, let's say that they change the structure of the response or the query parameters. Now there's a mobile application, there's a front end. So you have to tell them to modify and so on. So there's no way for them to know like if they have implemented this in a proper way. In the next company, what I did was like we came up with this open API spec, and they were automated SDK generators, and these SDKs were there as a part of CI, and they were automatically generated. They were used in the front end applications. So we could know, for example, if something is changed, we know from the build. The build is failing now because this API is not respecting these parameters that you're sending. So this, for example, also like some more automation in the development environments. If you look at my GitHub, I also have like a couple of other projects that I did. For example, there's something called iRomate. So we did the improvements in the developer experience as well. So one other issue with service-oriented architecture or microservices is like when you have like the local development gets really difficult. For example, if you have to spin up 5 different APIs, you have to spin up 5 different APIs. You don't know like if things are working on your local and so on. So we invested too much on the developer experience, and we tried to make sure that, for example, if you want to work on this API, you don't need to clone all the different APIs. You can connect with the dev server for these APIs. So you've invested into that. For example, there was some automation also. There were template repositories on GitHub that we were using. There was some scripts to sync the common changes from here to there and so on. So there was a lot of around that ecosystem of the developers.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about teaching, something that I think you and I are both quite passionate about. How did you break into, teaching? Do you feel like by building roadmap.sh, you got a glimpse of what teaching other people is like? Or was it more towards personal, individual mentorship of your friends and maybe colleagues and things like that?
I think for me, I started into teaching because I prepare notes for myself. So whenever I'm learning something, I try to keep notes. So these notes were kind of a paperwork for me. Like if I want to revisit something, I can go and revisit it from there. So this is how I started into this, like notes for me. But then I started into like publishing these notes for other people in the form of blog posts. For example, whenever I am tackling an issue, for example, I'm writing a migration, I came across this new SQL function or this new kind of query format that I had. I would document this in the form of blog posts. So I started it this way, like I was documenting my personal learnings. I started doing that online. How I got into this like visual infographics and YouTube. I started into YouTube because I wanted to learn about the graphics designing and the animation and this kind of stuff. So I was mostly making videos on the topics that I wanted to learn, and I use this as an excuse to learn about that topic and make content for others also. So that's how I got into this. So I was learning stuff on my side on my own. So the best way to learn something is by teaching others. Like you cannot teach someone else if you don't know it properly by yourself.
Yes.
So that's how I got into teaching.
I love that. So basically, you used creating content as a motivator for yourself to dive into topics you wanted to learn. How did that work out for you? Because creating content all by itself is quite daunting. It takes a lot of time and effort, especially if you're doing animations and all of that stuff. How was your experience?
It was not easy. Like one video that I was posting on my YouTube, it was taking me weeks. First, because I need to learn about the topic. Then I had to come up with a full. In the beginning, it was like taking weeks, and slowly, like after some time, it got improved. So in the end, it was like a couple of hours maybe. But I had to come up with a workflow that I had to set up for myself. But again, it was a bit difficult because in the beginning I was learning a lot, and I would not recommend someone to get into the like if you want to get into the content, start with one thing, focus on one thing. If you want to learn about graphic designing, if you want to learn about teaching others or whatever it is, pick one topic and focus on that goal, not 100 different goals.
What does your workflow look like? How do you create your animations? And if people did not check it out, roadmap.sh is the name of the channel, right? Even on YouTube.
Yeah, the
Awesome.
YouTube is called the roadmap. Yes.
Roadmap.
The workflow is as follows. So when I think about it, so first of all, I was coming up with the topic. So I have idea board on Trello. So whenever I have some idea about the project or about content or whatever, I just dump it there. So it's like huge list of ideas. Whenever I have some time, so I just go to it and I pick up some interest, something that is that I find interesting or whatever. Then I, for example, I would do some research about this topic. I would prepare my notes, like bullet points. So this is this. I would prepare my own notes on this. I mostly use Sublime for this. I open up Sublime Notepad, like I just write the markdown text, like this, and that's it. So I would come up with this, and then I would go to, for example, I use TL Draw a lot, tldraw.com or Draw. I just do the like rough sketches in there to like sketch. For example, if let's say that if I want to talk about the event loop in Node.js, I would prepare a rough diagram in there, and then I would go to Keynote. I mostly use Keynote for the animation and sketch graphics and this kind of stuff. I go and I draw there, and then once I have the slides ready, then I write the script that I'm going to speak in the form of video. And then I start the recording, then I use ScreenFlow to edit and so on. This is normally the flow. To summarize, like research the topic, prepare notes, start the animation and slides, and then write the transcript, and then record the video.
All right, Kamran, I love everything we talked about today. I think our conversation was quite insightful. Does anyone need to have specific skills for them to be able to teach others? Or do you think anybody can be a teacher pretty much?
I think anyone can be a teacher. Everyone should be a teacher actually, because you should use it as your own learnings. For example, try to learn it on your own and document those learning, and that's all that is to it. Like document your learnings, and in the process, you're teaching someone, and do it in a way that, for example, if you come to back to it like after 2 months or 3 months, you can read through it and you can understand from it. So this is how you can get started with the teaching. So just set up your blog and start writing, documenting your own things. For example, if you are going through a challenge on your day to day, for example, you're writing on this, writing about this. For example, let's say that you're solving this database migration issue. Write about it. Like do whatever you're doing. Let's just write about it in your blog or whatever.
Kamran, this has been fantastic. I'm sure you are an inspiration for many people. Thank you very much for all of your insights and everything you have shared with us today. Any last thoughts for our audience?
I think my last recommendation would be to always have a side project. This, apart from teaching, this is the second thing. Like always try to have a side project. If you focus on 9 to 6, you are just focusing on the stuff that you are being taught at or the stuff that you're working at your job. So try to keep learning on your own also. And the best way to learn is work on the side projects. I can give you a roadmap. Anyone can give you a roadmap, a blog post about learning, but it is up to you. Like start building something and you will learn along the way. Just keep building.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We will catch you next time.